A lot of people ask the question, how could anybody have ever let the Holocaust happen? Like, how did Hitler rise to power? How did all these Jews be exterminated? Like, how did people let that happen? And we have our answer. It's people like the Golden State Warriors owner, Chamath. I'm not going to say his last name. I don't know how to pronounce it. But people like him are exactly how dictators and tyrants are able to do things like slaughter an entire race of people and commit genocide. Because in China, we have the Uyghurs, which is a group of Muslims in China, being systematically taken to concentration camps and executed by the Chinese government. And everyone's like, oh, wow, that's happening. Why? Like, how is that any different than what happened to the Jews in World War II under Hitler's Nazi Germany? It's not. It's not. But the one difference is that China is good in the eyes of a lot of the power brokers in the world, while Germany under Hitler was not. Hitler's main problem is that he did not have enough multinational overseas companies and heavily invested in the German economy. That was his problem. Maybe if Hitler had convinced big companies in the United States to be heavily invested in the economy of Germany and have them economically tied to the success of Germany, maybe World War II and Nazi Germany would have turned out different. And a lot of people are going to say, that is going way too far. How dare you compare what's going on in China to Hitler? But ask this, what's different? What is different? How is China taking the Uyghurs, sending them to concentration camps and killing them any different than what Hitler did? It's not. The only difference is that the economic powers in the world are all heavily invested in China, and therefore we are not allowed to criticize China. Not allowed. Not allowed. Remember when John Cena basically did a hostage video because of what he said about Taiwan, and because he had a big movie coming out and Hollywood didn't want to lose all this Chinese revenue and stay in the good graces of China? He basically goes and does like a hostage video apologizing. We have way too many entities and corporations and people tied to China, and it's sick. And so Enes Kanter Freedom, basketball player, was calling out Warriors owner Shamar, or whatever his name is. Good for him. Good for calling him out. But it's disgusting how silent our media is on this. It really is. It really is. Like, so much double standards. So much double standards. And that's the problem. We have too much tied economically to China. Politicians, multinational corporations, you name it, too much is tied into there. And it makes me sick how we see companies like Apple and Nike, who are heavily invested in the slave labor done overseas in China, and yet they have the audacity to do things like change their Instagram profile picture to a black square after George Floyd and kneel for the anthem and run all these PSAs about how much they care and how much they fight for social and racial justice and all this, and yet they completely ignore the human rights abuses that go on in China because they know where their bread is buttered. They're afraid to call it out. Apple, all these multinational corporations, hypocrites. The NBA, hypocrites. They're sitting here kneeling for the anthem because of the injustices that happen in the United States when they don't care about what happens in China at all. They turn a blind eye to it. You bring any sign to an NBA game that says free Hong Kong, you're kicked out. But you can trash the United States all you want at an NBA game. They don't care because the NBA knows where their bread is buttered, and therefore they're not going to do anything about it. And it's sick. It's sick. And so you have all these politicians as well heavily invested into China, and it's disgusting. The owner of the Warriors, look at who he's donated to politically. Big donor to Joe Biden, big donor to Hillary Clinton, big donor to Chuck Schumer's Senate Majority Fund, big donor to all these left-wing Democrat causes, and yet all these Democrats who are going to run on a platform of social justice and racial justice and, fighting for the little guy, they all ignore what happens in China. And this isn't a partisan issue. There are just as many Republicans who are heavily invested in China as well and won't call them out. Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, Elaine Chao. I'm naming names. And that's why I hate playing the Democrat versus Republican game, because in Washington, D.C., they're all on the same team pretty much. That's why I like to call it the uniparty, Washington, D.C. political ruling class, administrative state, corporate, corrupt, bureaucrat, all that, whatever you want to call it, they're all on the same team in DC. Republican, Democrat, there's really no difference. They're not going to call out China because most of our politicians are bought and paid for by China, but it's just disgusting how silent our media is on things like this, on what's going on in China with the Uyghurs. They don't like to report on it. Like, we saw a video that if you can go to Twitter right now and see how black athletes that are going to China right now for the Olympics are being greeted by the Chinese as they get off the buses and planes and everything. They're being called the N-word. I don't see a lot of media outrage about that. Where's the media outrage about that? You know why? Because the media is just as heavily invested in China as well. ABC, they're not going to do anything about it because they own the rights to NBA broadcasting. They don't want to make China mad. They own Disney, who owns ABC. Disney's in bed with China. South Park made Mickey Mouse their main caricature about how Disney is bought and paid for by China. They're not going to say anything. NBC's not going to say anything. All these black athletes getting called the N-word, getting off the bus in China, nothing's going to happen to them. That's why I don't want to watch the Winter Olympics coming up. It's going to be disgusting. It's going to be a total ball-washing, ass-kissing suck-up to China the entire time. Nothing but propaganda about how great China is, how great they are, and completely ignoring their human rights abuses, and it's sick. It's going to be a total whitewash. It's going to be sick. While all these multinational corporations that are sponsoring the Olympics, running ads during the Winter Olympics, all heavily invested in China, they love to trash the United States' supposed racial injustice and talk about how much they want to care and how much they care and how much they fight for social justice, ignoring everything that goes on in China. It's sick. It's disgusting. I'm just calling out the hypocrisy of the Warriors owner and how our mainstream media, something I used to be a part of, by the way, refuses to call them out. All these woke sports reporters like Dan Wolken and Daryl Rovin, whatever, you guys know who I'm talking about, that love to trash the United States and love to put the spotlight on all these things that happen in the United States. Nothing about what happens in China. Nothing about how the NBA and its players are totally subservient to China, totally on the hook, totally bought and paid for. Nothing about that. They're all a bunch of frauds. I know. I used to work in the industry. I used to work in sports media. They're all a bunch of jokes. Anyway, I just wanted to bring attention to this and just say how it's disgusting, how our media, how our political class is so ignorant of what's going on in China. You want to know how much, how bad it is? We had a United States politician who sits at the head of the United States Intelligence Committee sleeping with a Chinese spy, and he's still on that committee. Nothing happened to him. But when I worked in TV for 3 years, I had to hear nonstop Russia, 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 Russia. Our president is a Russian asset. That was totally false for 3 years. The media loved covering that story, but they don't want to touch a U.S. politician who heads up the Intelligence Committee in the House sleeping with a Chinese spy. They don't want to talk about that. That is how much China owns our corporations, owns our politicians, owns our media. It's sick. Anyway, that is all I have to say about that. Shame on our hypocritical athletes, corporations, and politicians in this country that are so hypocritical and pick and choose the social issues they want to talk about. It's sick. Anyway, I already got banned from Twitter again. I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube wants to strike this as well. Bring on the censorship, guys. Just show how much of hypocritical Stalinists you guys really are. Anyway, that wraps it up for this video. Stay tuned right here again to me, William Lease, for my hot takes like this in the world of sports.